Welcome back to another video, and today we have some actual massive news for the XDefiant release date. This is no clickbait, we really have received some massive info from Ubisoft about XDefiant. In fact, this is probably the most direct and the most open they've ever been. I mean, for the past few months, we've just been relying on small updates from the developers, which overall didn't really tell us much other than that we are still in the same stage. So really, we've always had this idea in our heads that we're gonna get the game this summer, because that's what they told us. And ever since they did tell us that, it just went so weirdly quiet. And to be fair, in the last few weeks, Mark Rubin has been updating us quite a lot more than he ever was. But even then, there was still no straight answer if we're getting the game this summer or if it's been delayed. However, today, I think we finally got that answer. But before we go into that, I just want to ask if you could please consider subscribing. It really helps to get my videos out there. And I'm going to be making a lot of XDefiant content up to the release of XDefiant, and especially when the game comes out. As you probably know, when the game does come out, it's going to be in pre-season. So even then, there's going to be a lot of content in the game, and especially on my channel. So make sure you like and subscribe if you do want to see that. So once again, this news is actually from Mark Rubin. However, it's not a Twitter update. In fact, they actually posted this on the official XDefiant page on the Ubisoft website, which they haven't done since the 20th of June, which of course was when we last played the beta. And that's how you know this news is actually important, other than them brief updates we had on Twitter, or X. Now this update is called An Update on the Release of XDefiant from Mark Rubin, from today the 11th of September. So as you can see, this is quite a lot to read, and I know with people's shorter attention spans nowadays, you're probably thinking, I ain't reading all that. And I'm not going to read it all out loud because I feel like some people will just completely zone out. So I'm going to read out the most important parts, and although most of it is important, I'll just summarize it for you. So it begins with Mark Rubin giving a detailed description of exactly how the submission process works and how long it can possibly take. So the submission process is when they basically give the game to first parties, for example Sony or Xbox, where they check if the game works with their environments, kind of like making sure that the game can run on their systems. For example, it may work perfectly fine on PC, but perhaps it's not 100% optimized for Xbox or console in general. However, before they send the game off to first parties, it's important that they self-test the game first, and this can be a whole process in its own. They basically need to find and get rid of any bugs or issues to make sure that the game actually is eligible to send off to first parties. So once they believe they have done all the tasks necessary and are ready for submission, they then spend about 2 to 3 weeks prepping and validating a CM, in other words a candidate master, which is a new term to me, but from what I found out, this is like a milestone that they do during release. And to get to this stage, they need to do testing. So as Marcus says, this takes 2 to 3 weeks. They then send the game to different Ubisoft teams for heavy analyzation, and this can also take 1 week. And as long as they pass this stage, they're then ready to send off to first parties. So after about a week, these first parties like Sony or Microsoft will then have their final report on the game, whether it's certified for release or not. They'll then give Ubisoft a pass or a not pass, and if they don't pass, they'll also get a note telling them what exactly made them fail. And on top of that, Mark Rubin mentions that there's 2 different types of bugs that they're looking for. So one team at Ubisoft will be looking at functionality bugs, which is the kind of bug where gameplay features might not be working as it's supposed to be. Whereas another team at Ubisoft will be divided up into PC, Sony and Xbox, and they're looking for compliance bugs, which is also what the first parties will be looking for. So likely the most important bugs. More specifically, the compliance bugs are those like trophies being tracked properly, or if the friends list is working correctly with it showing status and everything. So overall, it seems like this is a very tedious process, because even when they do finally get a pass, he then says it takes up to 2 weeks to ship the game. And if they don't pass, they then spend a month trying to fix all these proclaimed issues, and then they have to repeat the entire process again. So this definitely does explain why it's been so quiet. It is nice to finally see some transparency about it, and let me know what you think. Does this justify the silence? Moving on, the next paragraph of this update by Mark Rubin is called, So Where Are We in This? So he basically explains that they begun this process at the end of July, and in mid-August they received a not pass by the first parties. They realized they had a lot more work in the compliance section than they had anticipated. However, what's interesting is that he says that if they did pass, they would have been able to ship the game at the end of August, meaning the game would have probably come out in early September, which is actually what a lot of us expected. So it kind of makes me think that actually maybe the plan was to release at that Ludwig event, which definitely would explain the silence, because maybe they wanted it to be a surprise. That would have been nice, but of course the game did not pass that first submission process. So he says that instead we have spent the last 3 to 4 weeks fixing those issues and getting ready to do another submission. So currently they are in the CM stage of that process. So if you remember from what I said earlier, this is kind of the middle stage of that process. and his words are that they should be ready to submit in the next 2 weeks. Now it does seem like this was written a few days ago, because he says that if this time submitting does pass, then we're looking at a mid to the end of September release. However, it's currently the 11th, so we're very close to the middle of September now. So I think the fact that this was posted today, the most likely scenario is the end of September. Although at the end of this paragraph, he says that another likely scenario is that we get a conditional pass, meaning they'll have to do a day one patch with some final fixes to ensure compliance. And if they do need to do this, then that pushes the date to early to mid-October. Now if you saw my video on if XDefiant's already dead, you'll know that I said an October release date is kind of dangerous, because we all know that Modern Warfare 3 comes out in November. And like I said previously, if XDefiant does come out in October, then the game's going to be in pre-season by the time COD is out. So I don't know if there's going to be enough content in the game to keep people on XDefiant and not on Call of Duty. So in my opinion, not just because I want to play the game, but in terms of the game's health, we really need this next submission to be a pass. So the final paragraph is titled, "So why no firm release date?" Mark Rubin explains that the reason why there hasn't been a firm release date is because, like a lot of things with this game, we have not chosen the typical route. Having millions of people play your game long before it's ready is not normal. Not being afraid to show an unfinished game to millions of people with all its flaws is not normal. If we were following the standard rules for game releases, we would have set a date far enough in advance with enough buffer to have a confident release date. Which is definitely true, because the only actual release date that we've had is late summer. And what he's referring to with the typical route is, for example, when COD announced Modern Warfare 3 on the 17th of August, but set a release date for the 10th of November. And in XDefiant's case, we were told in June that we were going to get this game in late summer, or at least that was the plan. And now we're just over a week away from the end of summer. So that's definitely one way that XDefiant differs itself. It's never had a firm release date. And he confirms that when we were playing the betas, these weren't just promotion or marketing events. These were actual tests. But I think they did very well in these betas. I mean, the menu was clearly unfinished, but in terms of the actual gameplay, I think it felt very good, very smooth. But overall, he says that the real answer to the question, when will XDefiant release, is as soon as we can. And it seems like this always has been the case. After all, this submission process is all we're waiting for. It's not some kind of lie, some kind of cover-up. We are just waiting on the submission process. Which, as he explained earlier, there's only so much they can do. So once they send the game off, it's the first parties who have all the power. So in terms of the release date, that's all we have. But to end it on a good note, Mark Rubin said at the end, "Since the concept of this game, we set out to be more transparent with our community and to listen to our players and act on their feedback. We've even shown that we will add features in the middle of development based on player requests. Map voting, which is now in, and a search and destroy like mode that is coming later are two examples of this. We want this to be your game." Now this is just exactly what you want to hear from developers of an upcoming game. This is what Call of Duty players have wanted to hear for years. But that brings me to the end of today's video. I hope you enjoyed it and I hope it informed you well. Let me know what your thoughts are on the news. And like I said, there's a lot more XDefiant content coming. So if you like what you saw, don't forget to give it a like and make sure you subscribe. And I'll see you in the next one.